I look at Oregon's schedule, and I see a 5-0 start being way more likely than anything else. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks, which is why, if you have not already, please like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to or watch this show, which today is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. We'll talk a little House v. NCAA and pay homage to, sadly, the late Bill Walton later, and couple of newsy pieces of Oregon athletics information you should be aware of. But we start today with the beginning of this Oregon schedule, and I think 5-0 is the most likely outcome. I think that's what Oregon fans should expect. It's how Oregon began last season. I think it's how they're going to begin this season. The only difference I don't see as high profile of a game on their schedule as Colorado was a year ago, prior to, of course, the big showdown against Washington. But you know, the Civil War will be carried on Fox or FS1, but every other game could be, I almost said Pac-12 network, but they're just not as high profile games. And I think Oregon fans should absolutely look at the schedule and say that should be a 5-0 start. They begin with Idaho on August 31st. I will be at that game at Autzen Stadium. Can't wait. I can't wait for the season to get here. But, you know, I also enjoy summer, so I'm not like too anxious about it. But it is going to be fun when there is real football to cover here on the show. Idaho on August 31st. Boise State at home on September 7th. Look, Oregon should win that football game, but it's Boise State. Crazier things have happened. They've got a new head coach and a new quarterback from a season ago, kind of. Their DC took over for our old friend Andy Avalos and then had a lot of success, won the Mountain West crown, lost to UCLA in the bowl game, but he'd already been hired as a full-time head coach, and they brought in Malachi Nelson. They got some other pieces as well. So Boise State will certainly not be easy. A game, though, that Oregon should win. I could see that game against Boise being one where Oregon kind of comes out of the gates a little bit sluggish. Maybe Boise's, play to Oregon to a 10-7 score or has a 10-7 lead at the end of the first quarter. Kind of like the Washington State game last year or the Stanford game. Oregon kind of comes out of the gates, not firing on all cylinders, not clicking, and then all of a sudden they put their foot on the gas pedal, hit the accelerator, and like a Tesla accelerating, just kind of take off and win the game big. I could definitely see it playing out that way. Boise's going to be ready for that game. And certainly Oregon at home, I think will be fine. Then Oregon State at Reser Stadium, September 14th, first road game of the year. And the other reason that I feel like Oregon should be able to start 5-0 here and do so rather comfortably, even in this 5-game stretch, you have major scheduling breaks. So you get your first game at home, FCS opponent week 1. That's the best way you can start a season. You get essentially a tune-up, like in The Longest Yard. Now, hopefully it doesn't go that way because the inmates, of course, beat the guards in that game. Mean Machine. Great movie. But week 1 against Idaho. That's the ideal way to start the year. It's a lot better than starting with LSU or Georgia or Auburn. Like having a tune-up game, working out the kinks, especially when you're working in a new quarterback and Dylan Gabriel. I like having that game right there. Then Boise State the next week, that gets a little bit tougher. Then Oregon State the following week, that's your first road game. But you've already kind of settled into the season, and you're starting to get your momentum rolling, and then you take it on the road, and you got to bring it. Because Oregon State's going to have a lot of juice at Reser Stadium in that game. A lot of juice, given this is the first season that they have been essentially relegated from the Pac-12 to the Mountain West as I record this show. And, we'll see how things progress going forward. But that's what they have to deal with. And so, the fans are going to have even more juice than they'd already have for the Ducks. And Oregon hasn't won there since 2018. I suspect they're going to be able to get it done after the way they beat a much better Oregon State team handily a season ago. But it's on the road. Zach Corvallis. So you never know. If Oregon were to lose one of these 5 games, Oregon State would probably be the most likely. I think that's the toughest game because of all the emotions that go into it, and it's a rivalry game. Crazy things can happen. You look at what Auburn's done against Alabama in the last several years. They have been vastly inferior and pushed Alabama to the brink. Had them at 4th and 31 a season ago. Gosh, that was a heck of a game. But was Auburn as good as Alabama? No, of course not. But Auburn was at home playing in the Iron Bowl. So stuff happens. Then Oregon has a bye on September 21st. One of 2 byes throughout the season. The next one comes on November 23rd, the week of, I think that's the week of Thanksgiving, before the Washington game, after the Wisconsin game. Then Big Ten play begins with, drumroll please, UCLA. That old Big Ten power, UCLA, on the road. I am not high on the Bruins this year. I don't think that is going to be a particularly challenging game. Last time Oregon was at UCLA, Chip Kelly was there, Dorian Thompson-Robinson was there, and if DTR doesn't get hurt on that final drive, Oregon might not win the football game. They were mounting a 17-point fourth quarter comeback, and they were on their way to completing it until DJ James picked off Ethan Garbers, and Ethan Garbers, by the way, is still at UCLA. How about that? Not many holdovers from that game that'll play in this one, but you got new head coaches on both sides from the last time they met at the Rose Bowl, and I think Deshaun Foster's in for a rough year one. They've lost most of their best players from last year's team, which was only 7-5 anyway, and Ethan Garbers will start at quarterback. He's fine. Serviceable. Fairly capable. Nothing special, though. And I don't know what Deshaun Foster brings from an X's and O's standpoint. He doesn't have Eric Bieniemy, the former Andy Reid disciple, as his offensive coordinator. So that's a pretty solid hire at the very least. But roster-wise, they do not have a bunch of talent coming in. Chip Kelly put them in a really difficult spot. Oregon's got way more talent across the board. I don't know if you could look at any particular position group in that game and say UCLA has an advantage. I don't know what their kicking situation is, though Oregon's appears to be solidified. I got a hilarious DM because yesterday I was talking about the most impactful transfers for Oregon on this 2024 team. And someone sent me a message, said, you left out Atticus Sappington. 0 out of 5 stars on Apple Podcast. He's being sarcastic. But Atticus Sappington, the Oregon State transfer, hey, he shouldn't be too big of an impact player in these first 5 games. But Ohio State, Michigan, Wisconsin, Washington, those are Oregon's biggest games of the year, and yeah, I feel like he could have an impact there if he ends up being Oregon's starting kicker. But UCLA on September 28th, then you come home the next week against Michigan State on October 5th. That'll be the first, kind of real Big Ten game. Every other one, or at least the first one at that point, will be fairly familiar. Everything else will feel very familiar. And then that Michigan State game, that'll be kind of the kickoff of, okay, Oregon's in the Big Ten now, and they're playing Big Ten teams, and it's the regular season, and, well, it's going to feel strange, but we'll get used to it. So I think that opening slate of 5 games works out as well as you could possibly hope. You have your FCS opponent first, 2 home games before you go on the road to play your rival, a bye before you play your first Big Ten team, and it's on the road, but it's not in a tough road environment. It's not against a great team. I would be much more terrified of going to East Lansing to play Michigan State than I am of watching Oregon go play UCLA at the Rose Bowl. I think they're going to be big favorites in both of those games. I think Oregon would be a shorter favorite at Michigan State than they will be at UCLA. I don't know what the lines will be. Vegas has not put them out at this time, but I think Oregon will be just fine in both of those contests. And then you set up the Ohio State Showdown on October 12th, which is probably the biggest game on Oregon's schedule in 2024 and will be the first marquee Big Ten matchup. But Oregon should absolutely be 5-0. I see no way in which they lose 2 games. A slip up, it's possible. I can't see it. Right now, look, I do my record predictions when the season gets closer. I'm telling you right now, I have a hard time picking Oregon to do anything except going 5-0 to begin the year. Drop your thoughts in the YouTube comments or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter. That House v. NCAA lawsuit is fascinating. Oregon's going to be just fine. You're going to be just fine if you go check out our friends at FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA, and the Celtics and Mavs are, well, winning all of the games. It's also winner take all time in the NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. You can bet Oregon's win total, which is 10.5, whichever way you're feeling. You want to cover yourself if Oregon goes 10-2, or bet the house because you think they're going 11-1 or 12-0. I think that 10.5 win total is perfect for Oregon. It's a tough number to bet. It could come down to a guy like Atticus Sappington, the kicker, for instance. But there's all sorts of other great stuff, so go check them out at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every playoff shot count. FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and our official sportsbook sponsor here at the Locked On Network. All right, mailbag time. YouTube comments, you can send questions over there. X, formerly known as Twitter, at @McLaughlinCFB or at LockedOnDucks. Those are the handles. DMs and mentions wide open. If you want priority access and all sorts of other perks, go join the flock over at Subtext. Link in the description below wherever you listen to or watch this show. Couple of questions came in over there from Bud. In the House case settlement, athletic departments across the country will create what's called a permissive revenue sharing cap of approximately $20 million annually, meaning each school can share up to that amount with athletes but isn't obligated to hit the mark. How will that affect Oregon recruiting in both football and all the other sports compared to other elite programs in the nation? So this House case is not going to be the end of the NCAA, which I think is actually good, though the NCAA is a very flawed organization. On the whole, it is better if they stick together, because what you could have if the NCAA were to just cease to exist, and the House lawsuit, by the way, was absolutely putting that into play. If the maximum amount of potential damages had been reached, the NCAA would have had to file for bankruptcy, and they would have gone the way of the Pac-12. They would have just not exist anymore. The reason that'd be bad is because you'd create a power vacuum. The Big Ten and the SEC would swallow it up, and I don't think they would act in the best interests of college sports. I don't think they're doing that anyway. They would just have more governing authority to do so, and the potential of a Big Ten SEC breakaway would increase, and I think that would be absolutely horrible. As for the revenue sharing and how it pertains to Oregon, as is often the case when it comes to Oregon and finances and being on the cutting edge or adapting to an evolving landscape, Ducks are going to be just fine. They're not, I don't expect them to have any problems. I don't think they're going to have to cut any sports. I don't think they're going to have to cut coaches' salaries. I have not heard, read, or seen anything to indicate that that's the case. And I think that, this lawsuit's a big deal. There are going to be $2.7 billion in damages doled out by conferences and athletic departments across the country for athletes present, future, and past, going back to, I think, 2016, when, some of these media rights deals were renegotiated. I don't know why they picked that particular year. I didn't read the ruling in the case and, how it all went down. But, no, I don't think Oregon has any problem here. And, much like when NIL came out, I expect Oregon to be at or near the top of schools in the country that can compensate their athletes at a high level. And I think that's a good thing for Oregon. You can feel however you'd like about athletes getting directly compensated for essentially, being at least partly employees of the university and needing to get, a rev share from the media rights contract that they're contributing to with the sport that they are playing. But I think Oregon is probably going to be in the top, 10 or 20 nationally. And, well, we got Uncle Phil to thank for that. Let's just call a spade a spade. So, no, I don't think Oregon will have any problem here. Another question that Bud sent in came in about, with this particular settlement, how do you know who to recruit and how much to pay each player? Does that require a skilled GM? What are the three most important skills of this GM, and what type of experience would be most beneficial in that role? I'd imagine this is going to be a Marshall Malkow area. He's the director of player personnel for the Ducks, essentially the chief of staff for football and putting together the roster and managing all sorts of factors. Recruiting and roster management in today's world of college athletics, for any team, frankly, especially football, though, which is driving most of the revenue in the athletic department, that requires a full-time staff. And I, your guess is as good as mine about, what are the best qualities for someone that's in this particular role. But, identifying who to recruit and how much to pay each player, that'll come down to how they allocate the money. Because one question that I don't think is entirely clear with this revenue sharing, at least as I understand it, is Title IX. Like, if you have $20 million to give out every year to your student athlete, is that giving everybody an equal share? Is Dylan Gabriel going to get the same as a relief pitcher on the Oregon softball team? I don't know. Like, maybe it'll just be a flat rate. Maybe it'll be different. I don't know. I don't know how that stuff works. But there are people there that are going to handle it, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. And I think that Malcow's experience is perfect for that sort of situation where you are dealing with personnel and roster management and understanding recruits and value and there are just all sorts of logistics. And I'm sure Malcow has a team under him as well that will assist him in these matters, much like an NFL GM has assistants under him and a scouting director and scouts under that scouting director. And like, there are all sorts of layers to it. And it'll be a collaborative effort. I do want to talk for a little bit about a sad piece of news, and that's that Bill Walton died yesterday or the day before, depending on when you're listening to or watching this show. And it sucks. Reportedly he had a battle with cancer. Unfortunately, he was 71, and a lot of people had mixed feelings about Bill Walton as a commentator. No one had any mixed feelings about his passion for college athletics. And as someone who is in that space in essentially three areas with this show, Locked On College Football, and my play-by-play duties for Southern Utah, I'm someone that doesn't aspire to call a game like Bill Walton. Of course, he's an analyst. I'm a play-by-play announcer and sports talk host. But someone who loves his job as much as he does. And I think that's one of the things that I and many others admired and appreciated most about him. First of all, I know several people who knew Bill or met him several times and came across him, said he was just a phenomenally nice man and someone who was just so genuine and authentically himself. And I am really going to miss him calling college basketball games. And, he wasn't a part of football broadcasts, of course, but he loved the Pac-12, so if he was going to lose this battle, maybe it's appropriate that he and the Pac-12, go out together, because he was the Pac-12. He like when you think about faces and people that personify what the Pac-12 was, Bill Walton was at the forefront of it. I mean, I'm pretty sure he dubbed the term Conference of Champions, and he really believed that in his, Walton's bracket. Like, yeah, Joe Lunardi's got 3 Pac-12 teams in. Bill Walton's got 8. Like, he just can't replicate that sort of stuff. He was one of a kind, and man, I'm gonna miss him calling college basketball games. There was nobody who I'd rather listen to on a Thursday night college basketball game, especially if Oregon was involved. He loved the Ducks. He loved everybody in the Pac-12, to be honest. Of course, but yeah, that was a sad piece of news, and he deserves to be remembered in the best way because he's someone who overcame a lot. For those who don't know his story, he had physical ailments and speech problems in his life that he overcame to be a Hall of Fame basketball player, brought my beloved Trailblazers, and many of your beloved Trailblazers as well, the only professional championship they've ever had. They haven't even been back to the finals since the early 90s. That was after he was there, but they've never won it other than when Bill Walton was there, and he just became one of one. There's only one Bill, and, I just loved the way he interacted with Dave Pasch and Roxy Bernstein on ESPN. I'll never have the opportunity to work with an analyst like that because Bill has now passed away, because there is only one Bill. There will only ever be one Bill Walton, and no one should ever try to be him because you can't. You can't fake something like that. He was just being himself, and I want to love doing what I do half as much as Bill loved doing what he got to do in the broadcasting space. So rest easy to Bill with the Pac-12. I hope you get to watch all the Pac-12 hoops that you can in the next life, Bill. Rest easy, our friend. Coming up next, a big decision and a notable outcome that might not be as easy as it seems. So, big week for N'Faly Dante. Wednesday at, I believe, 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. That is May 29th, 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. That is the deadline for players to declare for the NBA draft. As I'm recording this show very late on Monday night, the 27th of May, there has not been a ruling or a decision from the NCAA. We have not heard anything. This is going to come to fruition one way or the other by Wednesday. Maybe it'll be Tuesday. And on Wednesday's show, I'll be able to talk about it. But Wednesday's the day. Got to know one way or the other. Dante's either got to declare that he's going to the NBA draft or return to college and play with the Ducks for another season. And I hope he's able to get that eligibility. Not a guarantee that he will. Others have gotten it. Not everybody has. It's the NCAA. They're random with this sort of stuff. Like I said earlier on the show, I think it's better than not that they're around and that they stick around. They're a flawed entity. They make bone-headed decisions, head-scratching moves that you just go, why? Why did you do that? Why would you do this? Okay. You do. Yeah, all right. That's the way you saw it. You looked at all the available data and you determined that was a good idea. How many times have they done that? Several. So I hope Dante gets another year. Oregon will be a Final Four caliber team with him. They'll still be a really good NCAA tournament team if he doesn't get another year. But this decision is coming up. The deadline is approaching. So that's the first thing to be aware of. Second thing to be aware of, Oregon baseball has got its postseason fate. They're into the NCAA Regionals. They just barely snuck in. This was not a cake. I think the poor showing in the Pac-12 tournament made this close, but they're in. Can't take that away from them, and the opportunity has been presented. So Oregon is down in the Santa Barbara Regional, which, of all the places to spend some time and play a little postseason baseball, Mark Wasikowski's team got a pretty nice spot. I don't know if you've ever been to Santa Barbara before, but it doesn't suck. It does not suck. But, of course, they are mission-oriented down there. They play San Diego on Friday, 12 p.m. Pacific time on ESPNU. That is their first game in the regional. UC Santa Barbara plays Fresno State to start. So those are the four teams. UC Santa Barbara, the Big West champions. San Diego, the West Coast Conference champions. Fresno State and Oregon, those are the at-large. Oregon's the 3 seed here. San Diego, the 2. UCSB, the 1. And Fresno State, the 4. So on the surface, you look at those teams and go, well, Oregon played Santa Barbara close earlier this season at PK Park. Gauchos took 2 of 3. They were one of just 2 teams to give Oregon a losing weekend this year, which is a big reason why Oregon's in this position. They were actually the lowest ranked at-large team to make regionals this year. I think that's pretty much in part due to the bats coming in cold. Now, if they'd been able to toss in just like a sweep or 2, maybe they wouldn't have been that low. Again, they're in, can't take it away from them. But it looks like they kind of skirted their way into the regional a little bit here. Like, they just crept over. Like, they needed a double bogey or better to make NCAA regionals, and they made a double bogey. But they made it. That's all they needed, and that's okay. Not a triple. So, Oregon plays San Diego, and the Toreros are red hot, which is kind of news to me as someone who went to a WCC school. I attended Santa Clara. San Diego wasn't good at anything, really, and apparently they're very good at baseball because this is not the first time in recent history that they have won a West Coast Conference crown. That also applies to UC Santa Barbara in the Big West, and the Gauchos have had a really, really strong year. They have won something like 21 straight league games. UC Santa Barbara has won 14 straight games coming into this regional. San Diego has won 10 straight games coming into this regional. Oregon's lost 2 in a row. Now, on paper, that doesn't sound great. Here's why I'm not... Look, of course I'd rather Oregon be hot. Here's something you just cannot overlook. Yeah, Oregon's bats are coming in cold. The pitching is coming in a great spot. This is baseball. Of all the sports where teams can close a gap or win a game that on paper they should lose, baseball is maybe the number one sport. In football, like I was talking about with Oregon, UCLA earlier, eventually Oregon's just going to have more talent and wear them out. It's just the way football works. In basketball, you could get hot, you could get streaky, but Cinderella teams, they hit their ceiling eventually. They pull upsets. That happens. I think basketball is kind of in between. Baseball, anything can happen in baseball. I mean, you can be a cold team coming in, hot team coming in. Baseball does not always make sense. The law of averages play out over the course of a season, but on one day, for one game, it all might break your way. So Oregon pitching has been very good. I'm not sure who Coach Waz is going to give the ball to on Friday. I don't think that has been announced. I'd be surprised if it's not one of R.J. Gordon or Grayson Grinsell. Look, Kevin Sider's been really good this year as well. I would think R.J. Gordon. I would think. That would be my guess. I don't know if that is a lock, but Oregon is locked into that game against San Diego, who are red hot, and Oregon has to get the bats going. They put up 4 runs in 2 games in the Pac-12 tournament, and they lost to Utah and USC, and then they were out. And it was a quick exit and a lot different than last year when they won the whole darn thing. And that's what I'm talking about. Last year, you win the tournament. This year, you're exiting as quickly as possible. That's the way it goes. But postseason baseball is here. And last year's run of the Super Regional, it was awesome. And it was a real fun thing to cover here on the show. And I hope they have that sort of season once again. I'll be watching on Friday. Hope you do as well. Game 12 p.m. Pacific time on ESPNU. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.